When a human being is in a relationship with someone who abuses them, this is the key thing to understand. The person who is abusive is not abusive every day, right? And if I strive to be perfect, then the abuse will stop. Therefore, it is within my power to control the abuse. So there are a lot of people who get into bad relationships over and over and over again, not necessarily abusive. And that's because they don't rate themselves well enough. My behavior can influence the good days or the bad days. So, oh, my partner hit me because I was too loud. My partner hit me because I didn't make the food the way that they wanted. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. These are the thoughts that they have in their head. So what that means is that the abuse is not controlled by the abusive person. The abuse is determined by me. If I behave in the right way, I'm safe. And if I don't behave in the right way, I'm not safe. So this is why people kind of stay in those relationships, is that there's this weird dynamic that happens where they strive to be perfect. And if I strive to be perfect, then the abuse will stop. Therefore, it is within my power to control the abuse. I know it's kind of messed up, but that's like what's going on in their head. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. And if we look at gambling, right? Gambling is a random reinforcement schedule, and gambling reinforces behavior. If there's a fixed reinforcement schedule, if I work for 4 hours and I make $40 versus I gamble and I win 40 or I lose 40, people will still gamble instead of work if they want $40, because there's a fundamental part of our brain, there's a neurological bias there, where we get drawn to random reinforcement schedules. And oftentimes what happens in toxic relationships is the goods are good enough to outweigh the bads, at least in some part of your mind. And then you start to get acclimatized to it, because human beings are also incredibly adaptable. So since I've survived the abuse, like, I can handle this. Whereas if I date someone else, or if I leave this person, I don't know what else I'm going to find. Does that kind of make sense? So There's a lot of different dynamics at play.
I've always felt it was a bit, not necessarily in terms of abusive, but like I heard there's like that saying that I don't want to be a part of any club that would take me as a member, because then they must not be that good. Is it more of like a self-esteem sort of thing? If like this person is really into me, then they probably have something wrong with them.
So that is a huge problem, but not quite for abusive relationships.
Okay.
So there are a lot of people who get into bad relationships over and over and over again, not necessarily abusive. And that's because they don't rate themselves well enough, right? So if I have, let's say, like, I'm a decent person, but I have low self-esteem. So then what happens is there are people who are actually at my level that I self-select out. I feel flawed. Everyone's flawed, but I feel really flawed. So when I look at someone who's not really flawed, I'm like, this person would never date me. Therefore, I go looking for flawed people, because those are the only people that date me. But then I'm setting myself up for failure because I'm flawed and I'm looking for people who are flawed. And then what's going to happen? The relationship falls apart. That happens 3 times in a row. Now I'm looking at my friends. Oh my God, my friends are getting married. I've been single for so long. I've had 3 failed relationships. I am so flawed. Now that I feel even more flawed, I look for more broken people. Does that make sense?
It does.
So the really sad thing is, if you look at the best treatment, I don't know if y'all are familiar with like attachment styles, like avoidant attachment, insecure attachment. But the best treatment for avoidant attachment or insecure attachment is to date a securely attached person. There's some studies that show that someone with BPD dating someone without a personality disorder, being in a stable relationship for 2 years, can lead to resolution of the BPD. So the best thing to do if you are a screwed up person is to date someone who is not screwed up. And that may seem really hard. It may seem really scary. Or a lot of the reasons that people don't do that is because they're afraid of rejection. So the more broken person I pick, the less likely I am to get rejected. And therefore it feels safer. So even though it feels safer, it's worse. There's a difference between safety and worse.
What do you think is something really important that not enough people are asking their partner?
I think the most important question that is not asked is like how things work. So I don't know if this is going to make sense, but what are the rules of our relationship? So I'll give you all like a simple example. So, oftentimes people will disagree about finances. You know, how we split the bills. Do you make more money? If one partner makes more money than the other partner, how do you all decide to split things? Do we each pay half? Do you pay like 50% of your income and I pay 50% of my income? There's all kinds of like rules that people will come up with, right? But oftentimes the rules are in favor of like one person. Like, so each person is kind of looking at it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a meta level conversation of like, when we disagree, what is the system? So we can argue back and forth over finances. Does that make sense? And I share my point, you share your point. Neither of us is right, neither of us is wrong, but we're each sharing a perspective. But when we have a disagreement, what is our method to resolve that problem? What is our method of conflict resolution? What is our method of resolution? Is it just we argue until one person succeeds? Do you get this one and I get the next one? So I don't know if that kind of makes sense, but I think people don't talk about the systems of their relationship nearly enough. And that's because it's such an abstract concept.
And how could you tell if a relationship is going to make it or fail? Is there something you look for or notice in a person?
Yeah, so this is so weird, but I've observed this in my practice. So, you know, I see a lot of people. And the interesting thing is I see a lot of unhealthy relationships and I see a lot of healthy relationships because a lot of people with like addictions or depression or anxiety, like they actually have a really great relationship. So I think one of the biggest things is a red flag early in the relationship leads to success, which is something that is not what most people think. So a lot of times what people do is they avoid red flags. This person has a red flag, therefore I'm done with them. So then you look for someone who has no red flags, right? So then no red flags. So you're dating them for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and then a problem arises. Now, how do you deal with this challenge? Let's say a red flag arises. Now, oh, your partner is employed, right? So they've got a stable career. Like, I can date this person. They're independent. They've got a stable career. They're financially stable. Let's say that they're a software developer and now there's a contraction in the software development industry. They lose their job. Now this absence of a red flag has now become a problem in your relationship. Do they fall into depression and they never work again? You don't know. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the problem is that when you avoid red flags in a relationship, you do not assess conflict resolution. You do not assess adversity. You do not assess how this person will respond to adversity. So one of the biggest things that I've seen in, like, basically I've looked at my patients who have successful relationships, true of my relationship too. Like when my wife started dating me, like I was unemployed, graduated with a 2.5 GPA, like, you know, I didn't have any money, didn't have any prospects, failed to get into medical school for 2 years in a row. Like, you know, there were so many red flags. But the interesting thing is that when you date someone who has a red flag and you address the red flag, that can be one of the best prognostic factors for a relationship. Because if someone has a problem and you talk with them about it and they're able to overcome it, that's one of the best signs. Does that kind of make sense?
It does.
Because it explains to you, okay, like my partner's smoking. And I tell him, hey, I really think this is bad, right? Like, I want you to change this. And it's not like, I'm not trying to be a controlling asshole. It's like, it's bad for our kids if we have kids one day. It's bad for so many reasons. It's bad for your health. Like, this should change. And then if the person is like, yes, you're right. But you can't, if you knock all the smokers off the list, you never get a chance to have that conversation, and you never get a chance to select for a partner who will respond to adversity in the right way, who will take your consideration seriously in the right way.